Alright, so here I have my scarf joint laid out. The bottom piece is the one that we're keeping, the top is the waist, and the first cut that I'm going to work on is going to be this one right here, which is that stop cut for the back of the blade. This is going to be the front, the cogs are laid out over here, and this is the center line. So when this blade and the other blade match up, these two lines that go around should match up at the very middle. And of course, all the surfaces should also match up. But this line is very important because this is where I'm going to take all my measurements from for all the remaining joinery. So normally in Western framing, you would probably take it off of a shoulder, but just for kind of ease of reference and ease of making plans, you always reference the center line. So yes, there's a center line going this way, but then there's also a center line to the joint. So that's the one that goes all the way around like that. Okay, so work on this guy right here. And I like to do a knife wall. So in this case, I want to take the line entirely. I'm going to go very lightly with my knife, being careful not to slice my finger. Like that. Now I can go a little bit deeper, both hands on the knife. Okay, now I can go at an angle and take out a little slice. You can do it as deep as you want. Really, you just need a little bit of a V in there for that saw to get in there. Okay. That should be good enough. And this being a crosscut, I'm going to use my crosscut saw. I'll start over here, push to establish a curve. Make sure I'm staying on that line as much as possible. Now I start to drop the saw and pull it across the surface. Now I'm only cutting the side, the lines that I can see, so I'm only cutting up here and down here. I'm not going to drop the saw on that side. The exact same thing on this side. Now I'm going to take off that peak that's in the middle. And that's it for that cut. Now we need to make a rip cut over here. So that's the line that we need to establish, and I'm going to make it with a circular saw. So now I make this rip cut with a big 10 1/4 inch saw. If I had a 16-inch saw, I could make the cut in one pass. This saw only cuts to about 3 and a couple, just over half an inch, 3 1/2 inch deep. So it's not going to go all the way through the timber because this is a 5x5. So you can only make it, 3 1/2 inches deep. Thing to note is, because we've laid out center lines, the joinery is not going to care about any sort of twist or rotation of the timber, so I have to stay away from this line. If I cut exactly on that line, there's a very good chance that the saw blade is going to come into that plane where I need to have preserved for the joinery. So I need to stay away from it. I'm going to start off with about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to gauge where the blade is going, if it's tracking into the joinery or out. And based on that is how close I can get to that line. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Yeah, so sure enough, the blade is tracking into the joinery, so I'm going to try to stay a little bit further away. Now let's rotate this. Now I like to use a big long framing chisel for this part. So we're going to split this guy. So obviously we only made the cut to about here. So we need to remove the entire rest of that material. So I put my chisel right into that gap where that blade made. And yep, there is a whole lot of material right here that can be removed already. Quickest and easiest way to remove this is going to be coming from the side with a chisel and removing the pieces, but we're going to do it in 2-inch increments. And 2 inches because the big chisel that I have is 1.5 inches, so I could go slightly less than 2 inches. And they don't need to be perfectly straight across. And then over here I'm going to give myself a little bit of room away from that gap, from that step that I have. So I'll make 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts, and then I'm going to come back, and when I'm pretty confident where I need to be, I'm going to strike that line across and cut it very accurately with a saw. So right now I'm just cutting down to the line of where that deeper section needs to be. So I'm staying about 1/8 of an inch away from that line because with this saw I can get, you know, it's a fine cut, but if I go anywhere past that line then I'm out of luck. So I have to live with that. So if I stay a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch away, I'm okay. Now we're going to remove these chunks. But to do that, we're going to set it over the sawhorse. So the great thing about this part is that you don't need clamps, especially if you're working over a sawhorse, because all your pressure with your chisel is going to be downward. Alright, so I do have a big Robert Sorby framing chisel, but this thing is just incredibly long. So I'm gonna give the Mr. Chickadee chisel a try. So I'm gonna go halfway down the material over here, and I'm not gonna angle it straight in. I'm gonna angle it kind of like this so that the material releases that way. Getting close to the line, but not so close that it can have a tear up. And just over halfway, so I'm not going to go all the way to the other edge, otherwise I'm pretty much guaranteed to lose all my markings on the other side. Okay, Good amount of material removed. Just be careful where you stand, so don't stand right here in front of the piece, because, well, if you're hitting it this way, you can pretty much see what's going to happen. Cut your thigh or something. Now we can start a little bit of cleanup. So now's when I like to clamp it down so it doesn't move on me. Let's see, we have a big waney edge over here. Let's see if it wants to clamp on. And problem is that you need to be able to get to it from both sides, so maybe we need to reconfigure ourselves a little bit. I think that'll be good right there. So yeah, let's put it right back over there and then get to work. Alright, so the next critical cut that we're going to make is going to be this line right here, and that's going to be the front of those cog tenons that stick out. So, just because I've had trouble with it before, I'm going to do me a knife wall. And I want that line to be as precise as possible because those cogs are really only 15 millimeters long. And so, you know, if you reduce them by a millimeter, that's a good amount off of that piece. So, I'm trying to get as close to that measurement as possible. In fact, I'm going to use a dozuki to get that line nice and flush. So this is a dozuki, and it's the equivalent of a back saw, a tenon saw. This one has some pitch buildup on the teeth over here. We'll see if that affects it or not. But it's essentially a very thin pull saw. And it has this back over here to keep the saw rigid. Otherwise, this material is so flimsy that it would walk around. So, use it the same exact way that you would a regular pull saw. So now I'm going to spin this around and do the other cut over here. So I'm not really concerned about this right now. I could always go ahead and knock it out, but I'll do that all in one go when I do it on the other side. And this is going to be the no kidding, really accurate cut that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and do a knife wall once again. And I want it right on the line as much as possible. So I could probably use a dozuki for this, but since I've done all the other cuts with this saw, I'm going to go ahead and just use this regular pull saw, this Ryoba. Okay, so get it started by pushing, light pulling, so now we need to remove this material and get down to that cog right there. So yeah, let's just start breaking it off right here. And let's make sure that we have all of our center lines on there. Yep, our lines are still connected, so that really you need to be kind of in a mad rush. As soon as you make a cut and remove a face, you need to reconnect those center lines because you may need them in the future. So in this case, we had other joinery on this piece that we needed to draw out, so that's why we reconnected the lines as soon as we exposed that surface. Let's redraw these lines. So we're going to flatten this out to that line. Alright, so now let's reconnect our center lines. And now let's draw out those 30 millimeters. So previously I've made this cut with a regular Ryoba crosscut saw, and then I've chiseled it out, and that's caused a lot of tear out on this face right here. So this time I'm going to try something a little bit different. I still need to make the initial curves with a saw. So here I'm using the Dozuki. Okay. Now I'm going to make some relief cuts in the middle. It's probably about 3 extra cuts. And now instead of chiseling it, I'm going to give it a try with a coping saw. Let's see if this actually works. So it seems a little thick, but if I can get it in there, start to turn the blade some. There's one. There's the last one. Now, try to get to this side right here. Now I have just a little bit there to go. Well, that worked out pretty good. So now let's shave these down to the line. Okay, so now I can come in from the other side and take that section out. Okay, and then let's remember to chamfer everything. So pretty much all the corners need to be taken down just a little bit. One last thing that we need to do is check. Make sure that this tenon is not anywhere larger than this square. Because if it is, then that's how much material you're going to have extending past. So, need just a little bit on this side right here. Okay, so for this section, yeah, we're just going to set some curve cuts with the saw on both sides, that side and that side, and then chop out the rest with a chisel. And then in this case, I just use a 15mm chisel. And the first thing that I'll do is essentially come down the height of it like this and make different cuts like this to kind of separate the fibers. So. Come up to the line, and I'm going to do the bevel towards the line because I don't want the chisel to travel any further than that. You can see them coming out since we severed those fibers, or rather separated the long grain. Well, I guess we could do it like this, you know, just making sure that the chisel doesn't dig into the wood anymore. Oh, but it is. It's almost immediate. And these don't need to be absolutely perfect, but you do need to get all the way to the line at least. So the least part that should be good enough should be the exterior, because that's what people are going to see. Okay, so now let's go ahead and flip this over and do the opposite side. Okay, so the same exact thing. Take your saw, get a kerf going. First, so that last piece almost chipped out on me initially, so I'm going to go ahead and score it first. Like that. Okay, now I can come in. There we go. Okay, so now put my chisel in. There's that first one. Yep, there's a nut right there for sure. And if you're doing this sort of dimension, there really is no way to get around using a chisel. Unless you're going to be using, you know, larger tenons, that's perfectly fine. Then you could possibly use a chain mortiser, but for something this complex, Alright, that is excellent. That'll be a nice tight joint. So the one trick about Shiribasami is that it's actually surprisingly easy to put together. It's the taking it apart that is even harder. So if you did want to take this piece apart, you would have to make this mortise a little bit larger, enough so that you could fit a wedge or something in there and pry the two pieces apart. So remember that. In this case, I'm not necessarily concerned with taking it apart, and I'm not going to do an extra large mortise on this piece. It's going to be the other female piece that goes with this, that'll be made out of red cedar. So I'm not going to show that in this video, but in the final build of what we're building, we are going to incorporate that piece, because I do need to take these pieces apart to move it and then put it together again. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. This is the completed joint of Shiribasami Tsugi. You know, there's a lot to digest from here, but ultimately this is what it looks like. It has spaces for this cog to fit into this piece, and so the female version would just be the exact same replica of this. So yeah, so this joint is 15 inches long from this face to fit this face, with an extra 15mm cog on this face and right here. So the way I laid this out was using centerline layout, so it is not square rule. I didn't use any of the edges for any reference. I don't have a reference face. Everything is, every line that goes down the center like this in black ink like that is my reference. So those are all perfectly orthogonal to each other, meaning that this line and this line create a plane that's perfect. It's not askew like this, they're actually perfectly flat. And then the plane that this line and this line create are perfectly perpendicular to this line. So like this, you imagine they're perfectly orthogonal like that. So that despite whatever the timber may be doing, if it's twisting, if it's rotating, whatever it is, I can accurately reference these lines and know that I'm going to have very good layout. Hope you guys enjoyed, and best of luck to you.